flip in. I love this device. It's so cool.
Okay.
And it's actually kind of a neat little tripod stand you've got too. Kind of retro.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think it's like 60s.
It's like there's it. You know, there was a guy who did swimming to Cambodia. Spalding. Spalding
yes.
Gray.
Yeah.
And there's some point in his presentation he talks about, how tech has evolved. We're going through a period of it being impersonal, and he talked about how he longed for the days when technology was more tactile, and he talks about like the way ships look now versus old style ships, and I'm like, I look at things like this, and I sometimes miss the days of dials and gradient things.
I know, that's what I love about it. I mean, it's got like little knobs that do things instead of just like.
Yeah, and clean and all that. So, anyways, all right. So we're talking about.
Well, basically, first off, who are you?
I am Dave Bowman. I'm the provost of the University of Advancing Tech.
Okay, and basically, I mean, we just talked to Sue
about
the library, and I know we've talked a little bit about how do you find out if your library is meeting the demands of your students.
Okay.
So I was hoping you could just talk a little bit about how you do that, and also meet the needs of the programs as well.
Okay. I'm going to talk about what we do and don't do, and what I'd like us to do.
Okay.
Because it's I've been working with libraries here for 20 years because they tend to fall under education at UAT. And so one of the things we've always thought about is, like how do you integrate the library, how do you make it valid, and grow and things like that. And for years we've done what we think is kind of the usual things where, over the course of the year we have the librarians interact with faculty and our advisory boards to kind of ask the question of, okay, what things do you need to support the programs? And that's been, sort of a process. Like a typical year would be at some point at a faculty meeting, the librarians would come into campus and they'd be charming and helpful, and they'd say, like, okay, faculty meeting, we've got, here's our resources we're planning for next year. Talk about the books you wish we had. And they'd give resources and lists. They'd compile lists and they'd prioritize it and tell them and send alerts back saying your new texts are here, and you build your library over that, which isn't a bad thing. But after doing that for a while, Sue and I have had this conversation of, okay, this is great. How do you know it's a good library? And over the years, I've seen things done like, foot traffic measures. Like, okay, if we get a lot of foot traffic, it must be a good library, which is, okay, people are coming, that's something. But, does that mean people like the library, or does it just mean people happen to be randomly walking into the library? Or, it is a measure. If there's no foot traffic, there's crickets, that wouldn't be a good thing. But, it doesn't tell you directly, is it good? And then we get into, how about satisfaction surveys? And so you do student satisfaction surveys, or faculty satisfaction surveys, and the challenge you have with that are everything associated with surveys, which is, if you use a 5-point scale. Actually, my favorite was we did a 10-point scale for a while, and on a 10-point scale, we've been so conditioned in academia to assume that 60% is a low D, 70 is a C, and things like that. No one would ever skew lower than an 8, because that's below a B. I mean, you have to suck. I mean, like someone was mad at you, they'd give you a 7. So you had a 10-point scale at the bottom, 6 points were never used. So you had to scrap all that and say, okay, let's go with a different kind of more descriptive scaling. And then you run, which helps, and where you use descriptors of like how you feel about it, how effective it is, and just use words and not point scales. You don't do a Likert thing. We'll superpose it later. And what you learn there is that same sort of thing you pick up from rating fans, which is, it still skews positive for whatever reason in our culture right now. We live in a culture that's polite enough when it hits surveys that if people don't say they love you, they really don't like you. You could almost reduce all scales right now to either, I adore the library or I hate the library. You'd probably get the same information, because, if you do I really am dissatisfied, I'm vaguely dissatisfied, I'm neither satisfied nor dissatisfied, I'm somewhat satisfied, I'm passionate. What you're going to get in nearly all responses is going to be the top 3. The bottom 2 you almost never get unless something's gone horribly awry, and if it exists statistically, it'll be a single outlier. Like some one person had a bad experience. But you amalgamate the data and you won't ever see it. What you'll discover is, well, hey, on average, it's 5 points here. We're in the mostly satisfied, which means we're by and large above and below, and we're good. Tells you nothing. But what you probably really have if you interviewed the people is that, you've got a lot of people who go, it's a library. I get my books, it's fine. And then you may get a few people who say, well, librarians are really nice. And so I don't, have you seen Nancy? She's like my grandma. I'm not going to say I hate Nancy. And so, and again, you go right back to, you haven't really discovered, is your library effective? And so, which really kind of brings us to sort of where we are right now in our conversation about libraries, which is like, how do you get to the nuts of, does a library serve your constituency as a student body or a faculty? And we're doing something, we're just beginning to talk about something that's kind of weird. And that is, okay, let's, we categorize, I started looking at data that we get on the library, and all the information on collection development comes back in Library of Congress categories, which is fine, except that, what I didn't notice at first until either Sue or someone like Sue said to me, here's what's going on in my brain. I'd see it, I'd say, yep, we have so much in certain collections, and I'd nod, and maybe I'd see how some segments of the collection had grown or shrunk from year to year. But I couldn't get passionate about it, and I couldn't figure out why. And what it is that in every other aspect of the college, we don't think about collection development in terms of the Library of Congress notation system. That is a completely library science world that doesn't penetrate further. And, we don't talk about, we talk about things here in terms of our programs, which are, things like robotics and embedded systems and digital video, and there's no way to say, tell me, what's our collection doing in digital video? There's no way to slice it. The tools aren't there, the categorization system doesn't slice it that way. And so if I wanted to see, for example, collection traffic on my human-computer interface program, the librarians look at it with fear and terror in their eyes because they're like, I couldn't tell you. It's like those fit in the same segment of Library of Congress notations as all of the other tech that you have. And so it's like, and they wind up going back to, well, I can survey the faculty and I can talk to the students, see what they do, but that's as far as they can go with it.
Okay.
And so what we're in the process right now of talking about is there a way to, in addition to Library of Congress, which links to the searching tools, is there a way to tag the collection by program so that I can look at each piece of the collection and say, all right, this is linked to my robotics program. That's why it was bought. Like an advisory board member or a faculty member said, we're going to buy this for that program. And then when I do a search, I can say, okay, faculty annually, here's what I'd like. I'd like to have my open source faculty come together and analyze, here's the current state of the collection in terms of direct open source resources, maybe ancillary general computer science resources. I want you to take a look at the collection, make some comments on in terms of what parts you think are dated, which parts need to be revitalized, what things you want to add. Make a recommendation on that. Then over the course of a year, we'll order it, we'll work it into our budgeting process. Then over the course of the year, we'll be able to give feedback data to you on how the collection is growing related to those requests, and then watch traffic on those over the course of the year, how many of them are being checked out and being used, what's their frequency of use in courses, and then look at it by program at the end of the year. And then from an evaluation of the library, one of the things that we talk about for every department here is every role in the college has to have what's called a key result area. If you distill it down, why does your job exist? I give you an example for in my my job exists fundamentally to make sure that students learn what they need to learn. There's a fancier way to set up my job description, but fundamentally it's our students learn what they need to learn. Are students having a great learning experience, and are we meeting our accreditation requirements? That's why my job exists. Everything else is chaff or falls under it, but that's the three things. And then from there you ask the question, how do you know those are happening? And for the library, we get into the conversation, okay, well, why does a library exist? What's your key result area, for a library? And the correct answer is not because we're required to by accreditation. It's like, that's not a fair answer. It's got to be, tell me what it is, and then tell me how you know that the job is working. And we did a terminology we use internally called standard of performance.